That is the Polestar 4, an all-electric coupe SUV that maintains Polestar's absolutely Route 1 naming strategy. Apart from the fact that the 4 sits between the Polestar 2 and 3, both in terms of size and price. And it's also not a coupe because it's got 4 doors. Please make it make sense. Okay, so it's not quite as difficult as it sounds. The 2 is the small saloon, the 3 is the large SUV, and the 4, this one, is the slightly harder to categorise mid-sized SUV with the Beetle-y coupe-ish back. It's actually lower, wider and shorter than the 3, and it's not related to it in terms of chassis at all. This one's based on a thing called SEA2, which is related, believe it or not, to the Lotus Electra. Think of this as competition for something like a Porsche Macan or a Genesis GV70 electrified. And incidentally, the Polestar 5 will be the large saloon and the 6 a convertible. Lovely. Why does everything seem to be an SUV? Because batteries are tall, people are weird, and marketing. Although I will say the Polestar 4 is very low for an SUV. It's more like a tall saloon. What versions are there?
Right, so just like other Polestars, there'll be a long-range single motor with rear-wheel drive, a long-range dual motor with twice the power, which has the same motor as the single, just at both ends, and a performance pack version of that that gets a more sporty tune for the suspension and slightly bigger Brembo brakes, though no extra power. It does get some of the Swedish gold bits like seat belts and valve caps, which are proven by science to make a car faster. They all get the same 94 kWh usable battery and charging gear, and they all look pretty much the same, bar wheels and these little stickers on the side, which you can peel off, unless you option the gold, obviously.
So what's the big talking point? Kinda hard to miss really, but the Polestar 4 was designed from the outset to have no rear windscreen, and that's a manufacturing scene, by the way, rather than the ghost of windscreens that might have been. So instead of looking directly through the back, you actually look through a camera up here, plumbed into a high definition feed for a digital rear view mirror, which is here, obviously. Now this is a mirror that will also pan when you indicate. Look, goes from side to side. Although that is a little bit jerky, I feel like it should be smoother. And if you flick this here, it just becomes a plain old mirror and you can see what's in the back. Hello Manos. Now usually I hate these things because it does take a little bit longer for your eyes to refocus rather than just a plain old glass. And in this one, even though it's a really good camera and very clear, I still find it a little bit irritating. I just think it's not quite as natural as looking in a mirror. Unless of course it's the best solution because you have no rear windscreen. So what's it like on the inside? And if you're worried about the back feeling a bit pokey and dark because it hasn't got a rear windscreen, don't, because standard on all cars is the sky, as in this full-length glass roof that stretches all the way back behind the rear passenger's head. So this place always feels quite light and airy. Loads of room for my knees, loads of little toys to play with. Also, if you're worried about sunburn, don't be, because it's UV rated, and you can option an electrochromic roof, which at the touch of a button will send it opaque and white. And that shape also gives you actually loads of headroom. This feels really light and spacious, and I didn't think it would. And another of my favourite features is you can recline the rear seats. And in the front, it's all very clean and very Polestar. So you've got the normal Polestar steering wheel, the little driver information screen up front, which is always driver information. And then for the first time, you get a landscape tablet, which seems very complicated at first. You do have to spend a little bit of time with it, but it's got Android Automotive built in, which brings with it all the stuff from Google. So Google Assistant, Google Maps, all of that kind of stuff. If you set a destination on the sat-nav on your phone, then when you get to the car, it's already in your vehicle, which is really handy. One thing I have noticed though, if you play with this car a little bit, you end up setting all the different things that you need into these little widgets over here. So you get 4 little tiles over this side, and you can have your favorite shortcuts just here on the screen. So orange means it's working. So if you want one pedal drive and the different regeneration points, you just press that. If you want to switch off the lane keep assist and stuff like that, you can make it all a shortcut right on there on the screen. You have to get used to it a little bit and then play with it and make it your own. But once you do, it's a lot more simple than it looks because there's quite a lot of depth to it. So if you go to car settings screen here, this is one thing it has been doing. It's not the most reactive of screens. There we go, eventually. You can set up your quick controls and your shortcuts, and then it's got things like all the different functions for the driving. Again, you can set them up as shortcuts, so that's good. All the ADAS assistance systems, charging, gives you all the information you need. It looks really, really good. It has been slightly laggy on this car. Once you're into the function screen, it's fine, but getting there has been a little bit weird off this bar down here. Hopefully that will improve for the full production cars. Loads of storage, we've got cup holders here, we've got a volume rotary here, wireless charging, more storage back here, a huge console space under there, and generally the ergonomics are really, really nice. Other than that, the whole interior is basically made of really cool recycled bits and bobs. It's got this kind of knitted material on the door panels, it feels super hard wearing. It's actually made of recycled PET plastic bottles. And if you want a different sort of PET, this is welfare assured Napa leather from cows that didn't mind having their skin taken off them. Or you can have it in a kind of vinyl, which actually looks really good, and I think I'd prefer that. Anyway, the rest of it just feels... I just really like the way that Polestar has managed to nail the interior design so that it feels like a really calm and clean place to be. It really is a bit of a haven, and that's a good thing for a car. The boot is also actually of a pretty decent size. It's quite spacious. It's also got this kind of false floor thing. Underneath it is another 30 litres where you can stow charging cables and stuff. Although, if you do have a doggo that travels in the rear, you can forget it because it's dark. Be like a mushroom by the end of the journey. Although there is this, so you can put that down and the dog would have a kind of post box view. Nah. Does it have a frunk? Yes, but it's quite small. And it's not convenient because you can't operate it remotely because there's no buttons on the keys. There's a lever down here. What's the weirdest interior feature? I wouldn't say it's a weird feature, but it is odd that I really quite like, and that's that the interior lighting is based on themes of the solar system. So if you go into the interior lighting setting here, you can have it based on the sun, on Mercury, Venus, and the interior lighting, all the down lighting, and even some of the stuff that shines through this knitted fabric becomes a part of that. There's even a little flying Polestar down there. And here, look, we have Uranus. Now, apparently Uranus is minus 195 degrees centigrade and blue. Who'd have thought it? One thing I really do like is that 85% of the Polestar 4 is either reusable, recyclable, or remanufacturable, if that's even a word. Why has it got 3 keys? The Polestar 4 actually has 3 different options for keys. So you can have a digital key that's on your phone, which is very nice. You can have a key card that lives in your wallet, or you can have the actual physical key that doesn't actually have any buttons. Now, I'm sure this is all very new age and brilliant, but I don't see what was wrong with just having a key with lock and unlock. What about the outside? Well, like a lot of these efficiency chasing EVs, there's a lot of stuff on this car that is trying to convince the atmosphere that it's not a big bluff car-shaped thing, and they directly affect the way it looks. So you've got a very low nose and quite a slick profile, which is obviously really good for aerodynamics, and that badge, by the way, lights up. That doesn't help with aero, I just quite like it. Then there's these slim LED headlights. Now these blades are actually the daylight running lights, and the main light bending LEDs are here, they're the headlights. And then it's got these air curtains, which are channels cut in the side of the bumper, which help channel air around the front wheels and down the side of the car. Frameless doors, both rear and front, and retractable door handles also reduce drag. Oh, and I've always liked Polestar's frameless little mirrors because they're good for aero as well, and they look great. This time with extra camera views, because on the mirror there's one there, and even one here. And the back of the car is essentially one enormous aero device, like one giant spoiler. Even the full width light bar, this lip here, becomes part of that aerodynamic effect. And then if you look down here, you've got these things called aero blades, which look like they should be vents, but they're actually not. They're just little bits that extend the aerodynamic profile and move the air where the Polestar 4 wants it to be. I did think that this car was a little bit of a gimmick with no rear windscreen at first. I thought it was a bit weird, but now I've seen it in the metal, it looks a lot better. It does feel slightly weirdly sized though, because it's not quite an SUV and it's not quite a saloon. But now I've spent some time with it, generally, I like it. But is it efficient?
You would hope so, but Polestar is covering all bases by heading for efficiency but carrying a big stick in the shape of a chunky 100 kWh battery, of which 94% is usable. The range is just under 380 miles for the single motor, not much less at 360 for the dual, probably because there's a clutch that can disconnect the front motor for extra efficiency when cruising on a motorway. That's over 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is pretty good if you can get it in the real world. Spoiler, you probably can't because you don't live in a lab, but it is pretty efficient in the big scheme of things.
What about charging? Easy, 22 kilowatts of AC charging, which means that you'll be able to make the most of any destination charger you get to, and 200 kilowatts of rapid charging ability, which means 10 to 80% in about 30 minutes. Now that seems to be what every electric car manufacturer aims for without being particularly spectacular. It's worth remembering though that Polestar 4 does have quite a big battery, so for that 30-minute stop you'll get about 200 miles of range, which is enough for what, 3.5 hours of driving? You probably need a wee after that. What's it like to drive though? So what we really want to know is whether the Polestar 4 has the mouth to match the sporty looking trousers. And actually it does, but up to a point. Now, just cruising along, this car is exceptionally quiet. It rides really, really well. And everything about just cruising around in it is fabulous.
Well, initially on big, sweeping, smooth roads, the 4 felt pretty good actually. A little light through the steering and with little feel through the suspension, but pretty good. The problems came when we got to the twistier stuff.
But when you start wanting to go faster, there's a couple of things that start to grate. Now, the rear-wheel drive car is just on passive steel springs, and anything with 2 motors gets active damping. So the performance pack just gets a more sporty tune rather than a power hike. And it's interesting that the car doesn't feel like it wants to be a sports car. It may have plenty of power and it may be quite quick, but it never feels like it really wants to involve you. The steering is quite light, and it's light in whatever mode you put it in. And here's an issue I've also got. I want a button or a clicker where I can just put this car into a sport mode and have those things available to me. Otherwise, you have to go into car, and again, this screen is very laggy. Now, I'm not sure whether this is because we're on a launch, but it's just not working. Oh, there we go. Go into drive and then change the power delivery from range to performance, the steering feel from light through standard to firm, and then the suspension feel from standard, nimble and firm. I want a shortcut for that. Now, I appreciate you can put them into shortcuts, but then you lose all the other shortcuts that you've got in. I just feel like it's an added complication. If I'm approaching a set of bends, I want to switch it into sport and have done and go. You need a customizable button, which I haven't found in here. I find myself looking down at the screen, and I don't think that's particularly good. The other thing is, once you've put it into firm and performance, the car still doesn't really feel like it wants to be super sporty. So the steering is still quite light. The suspension is still really good at handling bumps, but it's not really giving me a huge amount of turn in. The body control is really good. I mean, this is a really tiny bit of road. I mean, that's really impressive, but the car's kind of understeering. It's precise enough, but it doesn't feel like it really wants to go around the corner. And again, you're sort of understeering round things. It's the first electric car I think I've been in where I haven't been stunned by the power. Oh, and every time you actually accelerate anywhere half fast, that happens. Your phone will slide straight out of the wireless charging pad and back into the cup holders. It's quite annoying. And also this digital rear view mirror, you're actually getting reflections on top of the glass, on top of the digital feed that you're trying to look at. So I can see the back seats reflected in the glass of the mirror, and then I'm trying to look at the digital feed as well, which I find quite distracting, bluntly. It's confusing, this one. I like it, but it's not quite as sporty as they say it is. And here we are in the UK. Okay, don't be confused, because if I look like I thought that Polestar 4 in Spain was a bit strange, it's because it was. So much so that I went back to Polestar and said the car is not right, and they agreed with me. They said that it had eaten some bad code for its breakfast and it had got an upset digital tummy. So I've come back to the UK with a different Polestar 4 that has apparently been fixed. So let's find out whether it still works. So how does it drive when it's actually fully fit and healthy? Well, I've actually managed to drive two different cars today. One of them was the single motor rear wheel drive Polestar 4, and then the other one is this dual motor like the one I was driving in Spain. And I have to say, yes, it is quite a lot better. The car I was driving felt quite disconnected and several things didn't quite make sense. Every time I went around the corner, it felt like it wasn't paying attention. So everything felt a bit weird. Whereas this feels a lot more positive, like the front axle is actually matched to the rear axle. It feels quicker, and the steering is definitely better. So it's more positive, it's got more feel. This feels like a Polestar, which is to say that it feels sporty, but not hard. It's not massively crashy. Some of the German sports cars, they seem to confuse hard with being sporty, and they just smash around everywhere. This doesn't do that. It rides well, it's pretty quick. So when I got in this car and first put my foot down, and if you put it into performance, now it's still got quite a laggy screen, which I'm afraid Polestar do know about. If you put it into performance mode and slow down a little bit and just check there's no one around, and then plant your foot, oh yeah, this one's a lot quicker. This car does have a lot more texture, a lot more feel than the ones we had in Spain. It's also a car that feels like it wants to turn, it wants to do stuff. The only thing I would say is that this morning I also drove a version of this car that is half the power, and it has a single motor and it's rear wheel drive only. And I have to say, I think that is the sweeter handling car. It feels ever so slightly lighter. The steering is much less sort of corrupted. I'm not saying the steering's bad in this car, but it feels like it steers more sweetly. The body control is just as good. It looks exactly the same, and yet that car is easier to row along at speed. It's not as fast, obviously. You know, this car has twice the power and twice the amount of driven axles, but I'm not sure I'd use all of this power all of the time. The single motor is quick enough by far, and I actually have more fun driving it because you're not hanging on to it so much, you're piloting it properly. Also, I've discovered with the digital rear view mirror, I don't think that it is a better solution than glass. I still think that lack of rear windscreen is a stylistic choice. Now, I quite like it, I think it's interesting and fun, but if you angle the digital rear view mirror towards you and don't angle it like you would a mirror to see out of the back windscreen. So I've got this actually facing me. They work fine. I've used them in vans and they're okay. I just don't think they're better than glass. But if you want something genuinely different, I'm always moaning that, you know, we've all got SUVs, mid-size SUVs, and they're all boring. Well, at least this Polestar is trying to be different. I do enjoy driving Polestars. I don't think they're the most sporty things in the world, but I'm not the most sporty person in the world. I like cars to be controlled and not smashing the fillings out of your head. They do need to work on that though, because my mobile phone genuinely slides out every time I accelerate. So, the Polestar 4, is it any good? Well, some bits of it are slightly divisive. You know, there's things I like and things that I don't, but on the whole, I think it's actually quite a good car. If you compare it to something like a Porsche Macan, you get a lot more equipment and it's cheaper. But funnily enough, I actually think that even though I really like the dual motor car, the best Polestar 4 is the single motor rear wheel drive, and that's quite a lot cheaper than anything Porsche has to offer. So if you're going to have a Polestar 4, I'd say the cheapest one is the best.